All right. Very good. Second thing I'll say is I'm kind of like the fighter pilot that turns things off to keep things simple. So I'm probably not going to monitor the chat very well. So if you want to get my attention, interrupt me. I welcome the sound of your voice. Third thing I want to say is Thanksgiving's over, Christmas is coming. That means it must be the annual statewide increment report training. Thank you for tuning in. This is, I think, the fourth or fifth year that we've done this exercise, and I've gotten positive feedback from it. So I appreciate your tuning in. I appreciate your help. This is, I think, a useful gathering, has been in the past, useful gathering of very experienced agents and brand new agents. And hopefully we can all learn from each other. But I'm going to take us through kind of an overview of the increment report process, show you how to get your hands on data. I want it to be a hands-on thing. It's being recorded. That recording is going to be posted on the AgEco EXT website. I'll have that URL in my presentation, and we'll just go from there. But if you got questions, let me hear them. We've got a 2-hour block that we can do. So there we go. First question: what's the increment report? Never heard of it. Where'd that funny name come from? I'll tell you, I don't know the answer to that last question, but the increment report used to be, back in the day, it used to be something that we published, like that paper-bound booklet there. We published a state version and a district version, so we published 13 books back in the day, a collection and compilation of ag values, sales values of farm products and ag-related products. On a calendar year basis. That's what it was. We've been doing it for years. Every ag eco department that I know of does the same thing in their state. Between ag eco and county agents, the burden always falls on us. So we used to publish these books, and then I don't know, 5 or 10 years ago, I got a bill, a printing bill. Hey, you got to pay for this now yourself, and that's when we sort of got out of the book business. So what it is now is an online PDF version of these books gets put on the AgEco EXT website. If you go to the website, under the resources menu, it's agecoext.edu/resources/increment report, increment-report. That's where it lives. There's also a hot link there and a hot link there. So if you can get to AgEco EXT, you can probably find the increment report, and the volumes are situated by year. So next May, the 2023 report is going to be posted at the top of this list. Also, the recording that we're doing right now, in a few days, I hope, is going to be uploaded and posted here. And there's a little one-page discussion where it says all about the increment report. That's a little blurb that I and some of my colleagues put together to help describe it. But that's what it is. It's a compilation of data reflecting the value of agriculture in Texas. And again, it's the farm gate value, it's the sales value within a calendar year, just so we're clear. What we're interested in calculating is the year that was, the year that's wrapping up. So we're thinking about 2023. That's specifically the year. And our focus is on production, the value of stuff that was produced. So in the case of crops, that's the crops that were produced and sold. Yeah, some grains are in an elevator and they're not going to be sold yet. Let's just think of them as being produced and sold. We're thinking about animals that were produced. So calves and foals and kids and baby emus and whatever, animals produced. We're also thinking in terms of value of production. We're thinking about weight gain on meat animals. So we're thinking about stockers and fed cattle, and then other products or services that are sold, including hunting and fishing and other things that I'll get into in a second. But the emphasis is on production. Why is this important? Why are we doing it? Why are we having a training on it every year? Well, the short answer is the bosses want it. the bosses find it useful. Again, that's true in every state I've worked in. I've only worked in one other one, but I know it goes on in all the other states. It's too useful to have this kind of information. So ag eco specialists and county agents are always going to be stuck coming up with these numbers. The administration finds it useful for needs assessment. They find it useful for interpretive events for clientele. They find it useful for their own evaluations. And so it's always going to be in demand, and that's reason enough. Uh, Here's just an example of how we use increment report data. You know, nice little bulletins like that and interpretive pieces like that. If it wasn't useful enough, I mean, to administration, there's reason enough, but other people use it too on a regular basis. State government folks call up, the comptroller's office calls up every year. The state office of the National Ag Statistics Service, NASS, calls up every year. Sometimes the governor's office, sometimes county judges, commissioners, congressional staffers, Senate staffers, and then a bunch of people that I wish didn't know it existed, trial lawyers, other people from industry, people that are valuing land. We got lots of requests for increment report info. And to a large extent, we are the only source of it. So these are the kind of questions that get asked that we tend to answer with increment report data, where it's really, really valuable. You know, USDA keeps track of major crop data, acres of wheat and corn and sorghum and cotton and the number of beef cattle. USDA keeps track of that stuff. They don't keep track of minor crops anymore. They've had too many cutbacks, budget cutbacks. They don't keep track of that. They come to us. Uh, so anything involving minor crops, anything involving local crops, county level stuff, they come to us. I'm here to tell you. It's important. It's not going to stop being important. It's not going to go away. So we're stuck with this chore. So again, our business today is to sort of help us get on the same page on how to do it so that it's most useful for you. So, and that's what this is my sermon slide saying we ought to do a good job with this so that it's useful for you, so that you can use it for interpretive events, so that you can have your office can have the reputation of being the, you know, the point person for agriculture in your county. You know, you're the authority. And this can help equip you to do that. So we're here to help you have it be that way for you. So,
Hey, John.
yes.
Yeah, this is Dan Hale. I want to just emphasize that the extension leadership team has been going around the states meeting in the district judge and commissioner court meetings that they have. And we are using this increment report in that. And it is the judges and commissioners. I hope all the agents are doing that directly anyways, using the information in this report by going to their own commissioner courts. But ELT is very appreciative of having this kind of data to help those counties understand the value of agriculture in not just their county, across the state and across the district and all of those things. So yes, this is extremely important. So I appreciate your work in this.
Good. Well, I appreciate that, Dr. Hale. And you just reminded me to say something. We are in the process, we being our implant expert, Dean McCorkle and Dan Hanselka, are in the current process of automating a system that will take your increment report numbers for every county and generate a county economic impact, kind of a standardized report, but it's going to do it automated for every county. They've done those kinds of things for select counties, I guess, upon request, but we're in the process of developing a system to just go in there automatically and grab the income report numbers and generate input, output, economic impact, jobs, and value added numbers by county. So hopefully, again, you know, we want to do that to be useful and to have ammunition that you can have for interpreting stuff in your county. So quick review of what the process is. We've already started it. Dr. Kelm sent out a heads up marching orders kind of email, I think on November the 1st. And then within a day or two, you should have received an email from us. Now, we also used to mail all this stuff out, snail mail, until I got a postal bill one day. And then I said, no, no more. No more of that. So we're emailing. We did it last year. Last year was the beginning of email distribution. I think it worked out okay. Some people didn't get their stuff or find their stuff. Took a few weeks, but we're emailing it to the A&R emails that we have, and we're emailing it to the county emails that we have. And I'm going forward in faith that it's reaching everybody. But if this is news to you and you haven't received an email from me that had price data, your county increment report form, your generic worksheet, if you didn't get that, if you don't know where that is, get in touch with me at the end of this and we'll get it to you. We'll get it to you. But we're emailing all that out. That happened the first week of November. It had some attachments to it to help you with prices, and had the worksheet, the increment report form. And that is due back to your DEA by the last Friday in January. I forget what day that is, but the last Friday in January is the deadline to have your completed increment report form and your worksheet. We asked administration to request of you to include your worksheets, because having your worksheets, having your numbers is invaluable for our error checking. Otherwise it leaves us in a position of doing too much guessing, and I don't want to guess about what number is right or what number you meant. I'd love to see your calculations, and so that's why we're asking for you to include your worksheet. Now, frankly, I don't care if the worksheet comes back to me as an Excel file or as a printed piece of paper with scribbles on it, or as a scanned file in a PDF form. I don't care. I would just love to see it along with your report form. And I'll show you examples of the worksheet and the report form if you're new to this, so that you know exactly what I'm talking about. We spend all spring doing error checking. The student and I, we check the numbers on the worksheet and compare them to the report form, and we compare the report form numbers to what they were in the previous 3 years and make sure they're either we can explain the deviation from the trend or else it's in line with the trend. We do a whole lot of looking at it. We recalculate stuff. We call people back sometimes and say, this number's 3 orders of magnitude higher than last year. Let's talk about it. So we do a lot of that, and we get through usually in about early to mid-May, and we generate the PDF versions of the books, and those get posted on the AgEco website that I showed you. So that is the process, the timeline of it. Okay, so I mentioned the worksheets. This is a tool just to help you calculate stuff. It's also a tool to help, again, to inform us about your calculations. So the worksheet, it's all in one Excel
Dr.
file.
Robinson?
Yes.
Sorry, can you share your screen one more time? I think we had somebody accidentally take control.
Oh, okay. Share.
There we go. Example
Okay.
worksheet.
Sure. I didn't know that could happen. So the worksheet is all in one Excel file, all on one worksheet. It goes from top to bottom, and at the top of it is the crops part of the worksheet. I'm going to explain all the elements of this, but what we're driving towards is what's inside, is what's circled in red there, the value of crop production in 2023. So let me just go through some examples of what's all there. I've already said that. Please return your worksheet. So here's the final product. This is what I'm calling the report form. This is for Henderson County. And I'll go back to the worksheet. What's circled here is what gets translated to what's circled here, okay? The only difference is this is the actual numbers that are calculated or typed in, and this would be expressed in thousands of dollars. So if you had a 50,000 value here, it would be 50 here. We don't do that for any other reason than to save space on the published report form. But this is the final product. This is where we're headed. This is what gets published at the county level, aggregated up to the district level, and aggregated up to the state level. It's these kinds of categories with these kinds of values for the last 4 years. That's what the increment report form is. Okay. And let me just reiterate, if you didn't get an email from us with an attached worksheet and with your particular county's increment report form with 2023 blank, if you didn't get that yet, send me an email and we'll get it to you quickly. All right. Now that leads me to, I'm going to spend a little bit of time during this orientation, more than in the past, talking about errors, common errors. And here's the most common error, believe it or not, is when we'll get a number, let's just say for corn, we'll get a number for corn that's maybe a little bit different than the reported number for corn, or it's a lot different. We'll get things on the worksheets that are to some degree different than on the report form, which kind of leaves us with at least two possible ways of dealing with it. One, if we have your worksheet, we could look at your worksheet and say, well, the acres of corn seems right, and so does the yield, multiplied by what we would expect to be a 2023 corn price. So that calculation looks good. So that might lead us to believe that, well, maybe you were right when you did the calculation on the worksheet, and maybe something got mistranslated. Maybe there was a typo on the report form. Maybe the report form number is wrong and the worksheet number is right. On the other hand, I know that the following happens. Some people do some calculations, then they pick up the phone and they talk to some knowledgeable person in the county about the value of that crop, and they hang up the phone and they type the final number, the correct number, into the increment report form. They have updated information, and the most recent thing they did was correct. I know that happens too. If we can't figure it out, we're going to probably call you. But sometimes we make a judgment ourselves because we can't call 254 counties. So I know that probably shocks some of you. It may really annoy some of you. Are going to say, "How dare you tinker with the numbers? I spent a lot of time working on this increment report, and you telling me you're changing it?" No, I'm not telling you I'm changing it. I'm saying we have to reconcile differences between different numbers for the same crop. They can't both be right. So what I'm asking you to do is preempt us all together and double check your numbers to make sure that what's turned in on your worksheet is the same or very close to what's turned in on your increment report form, and we won't have any issues. But this happens more than you might imagine. More than you might imagine. We'll get a half a dozen reports turned in where the numbers on the worksheet are incredibly, totally, absolutely different than what's on the report form. And my only conclusion to that is one person filled out this one, somebody else filled out that one, because they're absolutely different. But in those cases, we call the county and say, who's right? Who's right? Anyway, first issue. All right, so let's go through the elements of the worksheet real quickly. It's pretty straightforward. We're talking about production. So in a crops kind of setting, that's harvested acres times yield times a price. That gives us where we're driving towards, which is the value of crop production. So let's talk about how can we get data in our county for crops that are produced. And there's various ways to get acreage data. There's what an analyst would call primary data. That's you getting information locally from local sources, from farmers, from cotton gins, from grain elevators, from packing sheds, from ranchers, if we're talking livestock. Primary data is original data that you chase after and you document from local sources. All right, that's what that is. What we call secondary data is from the government. Somebody else collected it and published it, and we're getting it off the web or getting it out of a book. We mainly get secondary data in agriculture from USDA. Of course, USDA has different agencies. So in terms of acres, we get data from the Farm Services Agency, their certified acres report. We get historical data from the National Ag Statistics Service, NASS. We also get, I think those are the two main sources of acreage data. And here's an online link of one source, and I'm going to refer to this link several times in this presentation because it's pretty useful. This link at the bottom is a National Ag Statistics Service data source for historical data. If you click on that link, it's going to take you to something that looks like this. You got this list of crops. If you click on any one of those where it says quick stats, it will take you to a page where it'll show you some data from probably 2 and 3 years ago of what crops, major crops were produced in this county and what the yield was for those years and what the prices were for those years, what the acres were for those years. So this is a quick way to give you sort of a recent historical perspective. If you're new to a county, this would be a really good way to get oriented to your county, is by going and clicking on all these links and going and looking at your county's recent historical data. That'd be handy. It wouldn't be perfect for the increment report, because for the increment report, we want this year that's wrapping up, we want 2023. And the only source of 2023 data would be from the Farm Services Agency certified acres. Now, the Farm Services Agency has offices, not in every county, but out and around. You may have one in your county, you may have one next door. And you can get these data, particularly if you play golf with the leader of that agency, but you can go online right now and get data as of November by going to this website. And it's worth, just being a county agent, it's worth knowing how to do what I'm about to show you for the next 2 or 3 slides. So if you click on this so I'm going to take the trouble to run through it. If you click on this, you're going to get data on crops that were planted and then various coded uses of them. They were either baled, or they were planted and harvested for grain, or they were grazed out, or they were plowed under, or they were failed, or whatever. There's a lot of detail in this data. Here's how you access the data. If you click on that link, it's going to take you to a page that looks like this. The Farm Services Agency did a certified acreage report on August the 9th. They did another in September, did one in October, did one in November. The most recent one was in early December. If you click on that early December one, what it's going to do is download a zipped folder. It's going to download it to your computer. If you have Windows, it's going to download it to your downloads folder. It's going to download something. I don't have the name of the zip. The zip folder itself has a long coded name, but if you click on it, go to your downloads folder, there that zip folder will be there. You click on it, it'll open up, and there will be an Excel file, 2023 underscore FSA underscore acres underscore web underscore that number. That's a file, an Excel file. If you click on that Excel file, it's going to open up and it'll look like this. And you don't want this tab. You want to go 5 tabs in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the tab that says county underscore data. You click on that, you'll get this. Doesn't have this writing on it. It's got these columns and this data, and it's every county in the United States, beginning with Alabama. So Autauga County, Alabama. But if you look at the columns to the right, you can see the detail of what's there. There's the crop type, the intended use of that crop, whether it's irrigated or not, planted acres, failed, prevented, blah, blah, blah. That's all the detail of what's there. What you have to do, having opened up this Excel file, you have to scroll down about I'm not kidding, 150,000 rows to hit Texas, and then you need to scroll down to your county, and then you'll have a detailed picture breakdown of major crops, minor crops, all these kinds of crops with these kinds of uses of the acreage. That's what this will give you. This is the most current orientation. If you go to this data and peruse through it and study it, you're going to be the ag authority in your county. Let me tell you. So that's what you want to do. Now understand, this is planted acreage, and what we need we need really harvested acreage. So you're going to have to make some kind of adjustment, some kind of assumption about what wasn't harvested. This would be an underestimate, I think. It may overestimate it in the sense that not all of it's harvested, but it's also going to underestimate it in the sense that not every farmer goes down and certifies his acreage at the Farm Services Agency. So it probably underestimates the total planted, but it gives you something to work off of, and it identifies all the range of crops that are planted in your county. So I think that's good to know. So that's something that you derive from probably from that data source and local expert opinion is going to go into this first column of acres harvested. Now, the next thing we need to know something about is yield per acre. Where do we get data on that? Well, I had already mentioned that QuickStats website. If you click on those crops and look at your particular county, you'll get historical yield data from 2 and 3 years ago. If those were normal years, that may give you kind of a benchmark yield to work off of. But the way I would chase after yield data is getting local expert opinion. Let me skip on to here. I would talk to growers. I would talk to my crops committee if we're talking crops. I would talk to your agronomy specialist if you have one. I would use maybe the average yields from the variety trials that you have going on locally. I mentioned the QuickStats data source. Somebody asked me a couple years ago about, well, John, I've got 30,000 acres of dryland cotton with a 300-pound yield, and I've got 50,000 acres of cotton with an irrigated yield that's probably 1,100 pounds. How do I handle that? Because there's only one line for cotton on the worksheet and one line for cotton on the report form. Well, there's 2 ways I would handle that. One is if you're operating on paper, I scratch out peanuts if there's no peanuts in my county, and I'd make that dryland cotton and put in my numbers and put a note, this is dryland cotton, and then I'd put irrigated cotton on the cotton line. You could do that, or you could come up with a weighted average yield of cotton weighted by acres to reflect the dryland and irrigated average, and apply that towards the total of irrigated plus dryland acres. You could do that, a weighted average yield. And it'd be easier for me to run through it with you. I mean, if you have a question about doing that, call me up after the fact, and we can work through it in 2 minutes. So that's what I would advise. Just give me a holler. There's a QuickStats thing again. All right, so we've talked about acres, we've talked about yield. You type in an acres number, a yield number, where it's gray, there's an embedded formula. You can't type in this volume column. It's going to calculate whatever's inputted into these first 2 columns. So that's automatically inputted. Now, in the case of cottonseed, I'll go back to here. In the case of cottonseed, if you put acres for cotton alone, just on the lint line, and you put in a yield for cotton lint alone, it's going to grab that lint yield and automatically calculate and insert a cotton seed yield in tons. It's going to put it in that gray cell below the lint yield in the second column. It's going to do that. It's going to calculate the volume of cotton seed in tons based on the acres of cotton that you listed. So there's a bit of automatic calculation that goes on. All you're left to do in the cotton case is input a price of lint. Since cotton is in pounds over here on the left, the lint price would be cents per pound. And since cotton is in tons over here on the left, the cotton seed price needs to be dollars per ton. But it's all driven off the lint yield. So cotton is a special case on the worksheet. And all that goes to calculate the volume produced. And so now we're left with the question, well, what do we do about prices? Where do I get prices to value this stuff? And it's from some of the same sources with a few additional sources. USDA has price data that we printed and attached to our original email to you. One of the attachments was the increment report form. Another one was the worksheet. Another one was a price list. It's USDA data, and it comes from this website right here. And if you click on that first link where it says source of original USDA data, it's going to pull up that site. And you look down there where that yellow arrow is, that's the most current price report. Click on that, you'll get a PDF of current prices of major agricultural crops in the country. And you can use that for 2023 prices, especially for fall harvested crops. You can also, going back here where it says other USDA price data, you can, that's from the Ag Marketing Service and the market news stuff that gets reported on the radio every day. That'll give you prices, current prices of major crops. And lastly, you can get price data from local, original price data from local sources. Like in the case of cotton, from Cotton Gins, they generally have a pretty good idea about what stuff is selling for. The grain elevators are actual buyers themselves, so they can tell you what their posted prices are. And similar for vegetables, you can get, if they're forthcoming, you can get data from packing shed managers, feedlots, and slaughter plants. Usually ag bankers are pretty knowledgeable about prices are going because they're settling out their clients' loans, valuing them on current prices. Commodity groups are good sources of acreage and price and yield data. Here in Ag Eco, myself for cotton, Mark Welch for grains, and David Anderson for livestock are we're your market analysts. It's our job to give you price analysis and give you our estimate of what average 23 prices were. So call us up. We'll be happy to do that. All right, and we're again driving towards this calculation in the value of crops. So again, for crops, it's pretty straightforward. Harvested acres times a yield times a price is going to give you what we're looking for. Now, I have this scripture verse here, not to be irreverent. It's to remind me to tell you that I don't think this worksheet is sacred. It's just a tool to hopefully to make your life easier. And I'll admit, it helps us. I like you to use it because it helps us immeasurably in error checking everything. But I do get asked from time to time, John, I've got this crop in my county. I don't have acres or yield or price. I just have the total value. You know, I call somebody local on the phone, the local expert, and he told me that there's $1 million worth of this commodity produced. How do I, if I wanted to put that number on the worksheet like you're asking me to, how do I do that? And, you know, the way to make it work is kind of what I've got in this example. You know, if you put a 1 in the first column and a 1 in the second column, it's going to calculate to a 1 in the third column. And then in the fourth column where it says unit price, you put in your total value, and that'll be what shows up in the fifth column, which is where it belongs. So I mean, you can make the worksheet work for you. It's not a sacred cow. It's just a tool. All right, enough of that. So this kind of summarizes what we've been talking about. We're driving towards 23 farm gate value of production, which is most easily thought of in terms of crops. It's pretty much the same thing in terms of hort crops. It's only that the units get to be kind of weird, or they can be. And there are automatic calculations built into the worksheet. Let me back up to the worksheet again and say, we've left an area over here to the right where it says type notes here. You can type stuff in there. I tried it the other day and realized it doesn't wrap around. So if you type, it's just going to type a real long sentence off to the right. But that's fine if you give me the Excel file of your worksheet. I can read. You could type an encyclopedia on one line and I can read it. Otherwise, if you're printing it or scanning it or something, you can type short notes in that box. And so you can explain, if you did an exercise like this, you can explain what you did. Or if you're weighting average yields for cotton for dry land and irrigated, you can explain those kinds of things real quick so that it's clear to us, so that we don't have any questions and we don't need to call you after the fact. Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about how we classify crops. been talking about row crops, and there's some obvious, list of row crops there. These have just this is what we're used to, so that's our system of classification. So, what we call food crops is wheat, rice, and rye, and food corn, white corn. Sometimes there's confusion about where to put sweet corn, and in our way of thinking, sweet corn is in the list of vegetables, so it's not here. And feed corn is a feed crop, so there's all the corn confusion. It can be a food crop. If it's sweet corn, it's not really corn, it's a vegetable. And if it's yellow corn, it's feed corn. Okay. And hay comes under these feed crops, except for alfalfa. For some reason, alfalfa has always been classified later as a miscellaneous crop. So hope that's not too confusing, but that's just how we've always done it. I'm open to a good argument for changing a category of something if you've got it. I'm not going to do it this year, but call me next summer and I'll listen to you. All right, so that's that. I'm going to just hover on these slides long enough for somebody to see them when they're going back through the recording. But there's nothing really earth-shattering there or there. I've already mentioned how if you're typing in a cotton length, then it'll calculate the cotton seed yields automatically, and it'll calculate the cotton seed volume automatically, and you just need to input a price, a separate price for length, price per ton for the seed. The vegetable worksheet looks similar to the crops worksheet. It's got some particulars to it. We break out cantaloupes and honeydews and watermelons on their own, and melons, just melons, is anything else. Okay, any other kind of melon, and sweet corn's a vegetable, and anything else that's not listed there. There's lots of varieties of vegetables. Real minor crops. Put them on other vegetable if they don't have their own dedicated line. The other thing I say about vegetables, having worked in District 12 for a while and being around the vegetable industry, there are a lot of weird units to vegetables, bushels and 15-pound cartons, just strange, unique units. So just be careful. Keep your price per unit the same as your yield per unit, and you'll be okay. There's the vegetable worksheet on the top and the miscellaneous worksheet on the bottom with fruits and nuts in between there. The nursery is an example of something where you may not get anything. It doesn't necessarily make sense with nursery to talk about acres and yield. You may just find out that there's $20 million worth of potted plants are sold in your county, in which case, put a 1 and a 1 and put the $20 million in the third tan column, and it'll calculate through to the last column. And more of that. All right, that brings us to livestock. Livestock is its own thing. This is the livestock worksheet. We've had some automatic calculators that we added last year that are still there to get at the most difficult, the most error-prone things that happen in livestock are in the value added calculations for fed beef and for stockers. That's why we added these boxes to be more explicit. So I'll go over those in a second. Let me just say a few general words about livestock. Unlike crops, if you have an inventory of cows in your county, that tends to hang around. It doesn't change as fast as crop acreages can fluctuate a whole lot more than livestock inventories. So they're a little bit more fixed. So again, if you're new to the county and you're trying to find out about what's there, the ag that's there, you can try to understand the trends in livestock. And if you've got poultry or you've got cattle or whatever, are the flocks increasing or decreasing? What's happening to those cohorts? Has there been a destocking due to drought? A lot of, if you talk about hogs or poultry, that's kind of tied to the presence of integrators. So Are the integrators expanding or have they closed down? That'll have big discrete potential changes on the livestock activity in your county. So you can talk to producers about that sort of thing too. You can talk to livestock specialists. We're still asking the question, what's the production? But now we just got to be a little bit more precise about it. So it's more challenging when we're dealing with this one on the bottom here. When we're talking about value added, we're talking about value of weight gained. That's the production is gained. It's a different thing when you're talking about whole animals, because then you're just talking about how many calves were born and weaned and sold, how many foals were foaled and sold, or breeding stock, or how many adult animals were culled. All those things are per animal sales ultimately. The production is the creation or the liquidation of an animal with an associated value. So that's a little more straightforward. So look at again, I was going to focus a little bit on common errors. Look at the bottom, A and B, where I've got two cases of things that get reported that we see every year. And here's one that's, if somebody turns in something on the category of fed beef value added, and they report a number of head, in this case 10,000, multiplied times a price, a big price of $2,000, what does that mean? Well, because it's in the category of fed beef value added, what it implies is that there was $2,000 worth of gain on 10,000 head. That's what it implies, but $2,000 is kind of high to be measuring the value of gain. So what I'm going to suspect when I read something like that, and I'll get about 10 reports this winter that have this kind of a statement reflected in their numbers on this category, fed beef value added. And what I suspect is happening is that somebody's telling them, well, there was 10,000 finished fat cattle, and they're worth right now something around $2,000 a head. And so what they're calculating here is sort of the standing inventory value of the herd of fat cattle, but that's not correct for the category that they're putting the value in. I'll give you an example on the next slide or two about calculation of the value of fed beef, the gain. But these kinds of things happen a lot where they're basically valuing the inventory of animals in a county, and that's we're getting at the production. In this case, the production of gain. And in the case B, we'll get these. I'll get 4 or 5 or 6 things like this where they say there's 1,000 horses and the value is, let's say, $800 a horse. All right, my interpretation of that, the strict interpretation is there were 1,000 foals that were weaned and sold. That's how I interpret that. But what I think they probably mean is 1,000 horses got sold, not necessarily foals, but there's horse trading going on. There were 1,000 transactions around $800 a horse. That's one way I've come to see these things reported to me. The other is there's 1,000 horses in the county and they're worth this. Again, it's sort of like the value of the inventory, but they may or may not have been sold. But what we're getting at is creation of a new animal, if it's calves or foals. So just focus on the question, what's being produced, and let's get back to this value added, the value of the gain on a slaughter animal. So this is the actual calculation that we want to see. The starting weight of 7.6 hundredweights, the finishing weight of 13.3 hundredweights, with the associated value per hundredweight. That calculates through to the right-hand side there. You've got a total gain in value that's due to the weight gain, and the net value, the production, the value of that weight gain per head is $710. Now that's the proper calculation. Where did I get that number from? I'm not a livestock guy. I got that number from something called David's Livestock Value Cheat Sheet, which I emailed to everybody this morning. And from the top of the bottom of the cheat sheet, let me make it bigger. Right up there at the top, there's the numbers. These reflect average values for the state of Texas, according to David. That's good enough for me. Now, you guys are more, you may not be as much of an expert as David, but you're definitely more of an expert than I am. So you use whatever numbers you think are right, but feel free to use these. You could take these numbers right here at the top for fed cattle and plug them into the worksheet. Where do you do that? Look down there at the bottom where it says slaughter animal finish weight less the initial feeder weight. That's where you plug them in. The weights in the first two cells, the values in the second two cells, and it calculates that $710 worth of gain per head in this at the end of that arrow right there. It automatically sticks it there. All you have to do is put the estimated number of head. So if there was 1,000 head with an average of $710 per head weight gain value, well, then that calculates through to $710,000 on this worksheet. And I'll remind you, that would be 710 on the report form because the report form is reported in thousands. But this automatically calculates that number and sticks it right in there. You can take David's numbers and plug them down in this box. And that's how that would work. That's an issue with the fed cattle value added. It's also an issue with the stocker value added, of which there are several types. There's winter stockers, early, winter stockers later, and summer stockers. This is a summer stocker example, but it's the same idea. We have a starting weight, a finishing weight. We have a starting value per hundredweight and an ending value per hundredweight. Multiply those through and subtract them, and you get $495 worth of value of the weight gain with these assumptions here. And if you take these numbers, yeah, it can be negative, but if you take these numbers and let me blow that up again, go down here to the bottom, the summer stocker example, you plug those numbers, that's where I got them from, calculating out to 495. And you can take them and stick them into the Excel worksheet right down here. Same thing, plug in the beginning weight, the ending weight, beginning value, the ending value. It'll automatically calculate that 495 for you. You just need to input the number of head. This is $495 per head, value of weight gain, multiplied times the number of head, comes up with a total of $990,000, which on the increment report form would be 990. The winter stockers would calculate the same way. Where do you get the volumes from? Well, from authoritative local people and places locally, feedlots, slaughterhouses, your livestock committee, your animal science folks. And there's be another way. I'm not going to dwell on this, but the next couple slides, or the next slide is going to give an example of how you could also kind of back into these numbers from grazing data. If you're in a certain part of Texas, namely the Rolling Plains, where there's a well-established industry of grazing stocker cattle on wheat. So if you know that, you can go to those certified acres data and get the wheat and other small grains with these classifications, the GS classification, the GZ classification. If you know those acres, I'm going to flip to the next. If you know those acres, you can sort of back into the number of calves. If it's not a super drought year and the forage is there, you can back into the number of calves in that scenario using the stocking rate. So I'm just going to hover here for a second so that people can come back to this on the recording. I'm not going to dwell on the math, but there's a way to back into it. Again, if you got a question about that, get a hold of me, and I'll probably hand you off to Poncho or some knowledgeable Rolling Plains economist. But we can help you out. All right, So that was the value added part. That's the hardest part of, to my way of thinking, the hardest part of the livestock calculations. The whole animal ones are a little more straightforward. We're just talking about the value of production. We're talking about the value of production of whole animals, either calves that are born and weaned and sold, or foals that are foaled and sold, or emus or whatever, or animals that are culled. That's an adult animal that's sold and liquidated, but it's still a per head sort of activity, per head sales. So there is a way to use an available secondary data source to help out. If you don't know how many calves, well, first of all, how might you go about this? You're brand new or don't know anything. You're like me, you don't know anything about ranching. Again, you talk to your livestock committee, you talk to a cattle buyer, talk to the sale barn, find out, people probably have opinions about how many calves are produced in your area every year. And so I would be talking to them. You can also use some secondary data sources to get at the number of calves produced and the number of slaughter cattle, cull bulls and cows produced. I'll dwell on that just again long enough for folks to get back to it and understand the procedure when they're looking at the recording. But if you go at the very bottom here, if you go again one more time, go back to this USDA data source, the quick stats source, and down here at the bottom, there's the bottommost link. It says beef cows, milk cows, and all cattle. If you click on that, it'll take you to the cattle inventory data, which is I believe a twice a year, January and July. There's a published estimate of the number of cows and the number of cattle in your county. And knowing that with some assumptions could help you come up with calf numbers, as well as home numbers. So here's an example of that coming up. To do it, you'll need to know something about prices. So I'm going back to David's cheat sheet and I'm clicking on the top. Up here at the top, he's just got price per hundredweight of various size steers. So we're going to use these 475 numbers in an example. And we're going to use these prices for cull cows and cull bulls in the following example. He's got a bunch of other prices here for other stuff. But we're going to work off of this to get at the calf estimate exercise. So let's say that you go to that website and you find out that in January of, it would have been January of last year, they won't have anything published. Well, they might. I don't know when they update it. Anyway, at some point you're going to get numbers for the number of cows, a notion of the number of cows in your county. If you get a weaning percentage from some knowledgeable person, not me, you can, using the number of cows in the county, you can come up with an estimate of the number of calves born. In this case, 7,636 calves. You assume half of those are bulls, half of those are heifers. Get down to step 3, make an assumption about how many heifers are being kept back for replacement. That gives you the number of heifers left to be sold. You go down to step 4, then you've got 3,800 and change steers and 1,900 and change heifers times a price times a weight, times a weight times a price, a heifer price and a steer price. That's going to give you a value per head times the number of steers and the number of heifers. That's going to give you two values over here on the right, 4.9 million and $2.2 million. You add those two together and you get almost $7.1 million in step 5. And that's the number you want for your increment report. Right there on the very right of the right hand of the red colored box, that is the number you want, the total. It's calves, heifers, and steers. If you want to use there's 2 ways you could enter that. You could put a 1 and a 1, and it'll calculate to a 1 and multiply it in the unit price column. You could put that 7 million, it'll calculate through to the 7 million in the right column. You could do it that way. Or what's been done here is that we calculated a weighted price using step 5 here, you could, the total dollar value, 7.9 or $7.1 million divided by the total number, the sum of the calves and the steers, gives you a weighted price of $12.23. And you could stick that in there and put that total steers and heifers in there, and it would multiply through to the number that you knew was the total number, if you wanted to reflect that in your increment report form. But that's the way to get at the calf, driven off your initial estimate of the number of cows in your county. And we can also use the cull calf price and the cull bull to make some similar assumptions about cull rates. And I'm not going to dwell on this, but you can, again, go back in and calculate the value of the cull cows and the cull bulls, and the total of that is the value of other beef slaughter cattle, is the name of that category. And I'm just going to hover on this so people can go back to it. You can, similarly to the calf example, you can calculate a weighted price times the cull bulls plus the cow calves, and that'll give you that total value of $1.2 million. You could do that way, or you could just put a 1 there and a 1 there and multiply through to a 1 there and put the 12.3 million in the fourth column, and it would calculate through. All right, that was quick, but that's how to use some of the available secondary data to get at that calf production and slaughter cow and bull production. However, you can get poultry numbers, meat animals. You got to obviously talk to producers. These are kind of the livestock equivalent of minor crops, so you're going to have some knowledgeable producers, or if there's a slaughter facility or a buyer or whatever, to get at the number and the value, you'd have to get it from those kinds of local sources. Horses, I have the same note that I already made before, and that is what we're after is production. Production means foals that are born and weaned and sold. It's not all the other horse trading that goes on. Okay, then we've got a series of things related to other ag. You've got in this one, we call it ag related, but it's a lot of natural resource stuff, fishing. The horses fit in here, but there's hunting and recreation. There's timber in here. I'll remind people from all these East Texas counties that 2 years ago, we sort of came to a consensus that this value of lumber, the stumpage value of lumber, was something that the Forest Service, Texas Forest Service, was publishing. They published this. This is for one county, but they have it for all of these East Texas counties. What's in that black circle is what we would think would be the millions of dollars worth of stumpage value that folks ought to use. The only trouble is they did this in 21. They didn't do it in 22. I called them up recently and said, when's the next time you're going to do this? And they said, probably next May or June, which is too late for our process here. So I'm going to say, look at these numbers for your county and tweak them, put in something that you think is kind of an incremental change from what it was in 2021, but use these as a 2-year-old baseline and make your best guess. Next year, we'll probably use what they publish in 2023 as a baseline. That would be my intention. Again, unless somebody else has a much better idea, in which case bring it up to me in the summertime and we can work on it. Worksheets for more hunting for leases specifically. Again, I'll return to my statement about man was not created for the Sabbath. Make these things work for you depending on how leases are valued, if it's per head, per gun, per acre, if it's broken out differently by different, deer leases are one thing and quail leases are different. Just make it fit and type a note and let us know what your numbers actually, what they mean, what you meant by it, what data you used, whatever. We'll take all the guidance we can get. And I was sort of hinting at what I just said. So kind of in summary, we need to translate everything from the commodity worksheets to the report form. Please double check that you've got the same numbers on the commodity worksheet going to the report form. Please remember that the report form is reported in thousands. Make that adjustment. I've already highlighted that. Other common problems that we see, common errors, or, somebody will multiply dollars per bushel price times a hundredweight per acre yield. So make sure that your units are the same. This issue with the value added that I mentioned before, just make sure that you're either valuing the value of gain or you're valuing the production of a new animal. And that's the sermon. The recording of this presentation is going to go up on the AgEco website under this link right here as soon as I can do it. So within a week or so, I hope, if not sooner. And that's it. I'll remind more seasoned agents that we used to have a dedicated email. We thought it was a good idea. It wasn't a good idea because when they migrated the emails, this quit working, and then people were using it, not getting any response from us. So just don't use that. Just email me. I'll keep it easy. Call me on my cell, email me, and we'll take care of you. And with that, I'll leave the slides up to scroll back to anything that anybody wants to talk about. Questions, comments, criticisms. Let's hear it.
Dr. Robertson, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
This is John Barton here from Duval County. I need for you to send me the forms. I haven't received them for the report,
Okay.
for the increment report.
Okay. The original
Yeah,
for Duval. You said
Yeah,
Duval?
for Duval.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
And anybody else out there that didn't get the early November email from us, or got it misplaced, we'll resend it. Just let us know. Well, I'll hang on for any questions anybody might have. The rest of you, I appreciate your time. Thank you for helping out. Thank you for sharing your expertise. I've learned a lot the last few years. You got any issues, we can help you out. Just let us know.
Thanks, John.
Yes, sir.